I don't really see myself as anything special. To be honest, I just want more of mankind and humanity to know how to live a more peaceful, more authentic, and more harmonious life. And to be honest with you, there's this old saying, like a lot of companies, they'll start a company and they'll say, we want to affect 1 billion people by 2025. They'll say, that's our company's mission statement. We want to affect or change or help 1 billion people by this year or that year. And the interesting thing is you're doing it all the time, but you do not realize that the invisibility of your nature and your effect in this world leaves ripples and effects that you can never measure, that you can never even give yourself credit for, because we're all in this tapestry together. We're all such parts of the whole, such pieces of the puzzle together. And I am just one thread of this tapestry of humankind, and that's all there is, other than knowing that you affect 1 billion people just by being that thread in the tapestry.
If you are already in stress, having caffeine can make your body produce more adrenaline, which increases your stress even more. Hello boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, this is Nishant and welcome to the Nishant Garg Show. This is a podcast about helping you live a fulfilled life, and my job on this show is to sit with the world-class experts to extract the practices, routines and habits to help you live a fulfilled and abundant life. Today's guest is Dr. Amy Coleman. Dr. Amy is the CEO and founder of Wellsmart, a federally recognized women-owned, veteran-owned company that delivers advanced healthcare systems to the government and military sectors. She is owner and practitioner of the Wellsmart Functional and Integrative Medicine Clinic. Dr. Coleman has 8 years of military medical leadership as a flight surgeon in the United States Air Force. She served as an expeditionary flight surgeon during Operation Iraqi Freedom and was promoted as the first female and youngest commander of the Special Operations Clinic at the Air Force European headquarters. She was trained in Japanese Acupuncture from Harvard. In this episode, Dr. Amy goes deep into Eastern and Western models of wellness. And now, without further ado, please enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with Amy. Dr. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nishant. It's great to be here.
My pleasure. I'm wondering, where shall we start from? So I was thinking, I would love to ask you, how do your family describe what you do for a living?
Well, it depends on who you ask. Probably, if you ask my mom, she'll probably embellish and make it sound like I do a lot more than what I do, because she's very proud of me. If you ask my dad, he'll probably scratch his head and say, she's a doctor, but I just still don't know what kind she is. And if you ask my brother, he may just, let's see, how would he respond? He would probably say I come in handy when he needs me to call in something to a pharmacy, or but yeah, it's wonderful being a physician for my family, because if something comes up, oftentimes when they go to a doctor, they don't get answers. Like they get kind of shuffled through. It's kind of more like an assembly line experience. So I'm always really happy to answer questions when they have them, because often the experience that a lot of clinics or hospitals provide is just not a lot of time to ask and really learn.
What kind of a doctor are you?
Well, I've been many different types of doctors, and over the past, 20 years. So I started as an intern just after medical school, and just trying to figure my way around. And 9/11 happened, and I felt this huge need to go help, after the Twin Towers fell. And I just I had to really hold myself back from trying to get on a plane and even go into the area just to see how I could be of assistance. I felt such a strong pull. And so the closest thing I could do to help was actually defer my residency and become a flight surgeon and become an active duty Air Force officer by being a flight surgeon. So to be honest with you, 9/11 was my start to become a physician that really led me down the track to holistic, preventative, outside of the box thinking, functional, integrative, experiential medicine that was different than what I could ever have gotten in the academic setting. So after all my experiences, what I say now is I'm a functional integrative medicine doctor, but really those are just words. I think the big picture is I look to where the source of an issue is instead of just treating the symptoms. And unfortunately, in modern medicine, we're so good at patching holes or sewing on things that have fallen off, or doing trauma care. We're great at the highly dramatic types of medicine, but when it comes to chronic disease, mental emotional issues of disease, we're really bad at it. And so if it's not in a pill form, a lot of times they don't know what to do with you in mainstream kind of medicine. Or if it's not in a form that is quick and easy, then it's tough, because the current system we have in medicine, it doesn't allow a lot of time with patients. And so I was really spoiled in the military because I had all the time in the world to develop plans, treatments, personalize and make very precise what each patient needed, because I saw them all as individuals needing, special kind of recipes. But in the medicine that I learned in residency, everybody basically had the same recipe. You could be a female, a male. You could be 300 pounds or 100 pounds. You could have the diagnosis of hypertension and get the same treatment every time. But what I found in the military was everybody is a unique individual. And through functional integrative studies and Eastern medicine studies, it became more and more clear that we really need to focus on what makes us have the problem, because hypertension can develop from 6, 7, 8 different means or ways, depending on the individual. Diabetes can happen in many different forms and many different ways, and might need a different edge or method. And so we just need to kind of pay more attention and care more, to be quite honest, and have the time to do the work we need to do.
You mentioned about functional integrative medicine. Could you please explain that in brief for our listeners who may not be aware of this kind of medicine?
Sure. So functional medicine is looking for the source of where a problem happens instead of just treating the symptom. So, for example, if you have heartburn, where you have the burning in your food tube after you eat something spicy, oftentimes doctors would say, oh, well, you're just making too much stomach acid. And they'd give you a pill called Prilosec or Zantac or something to kind of cool that heat in the food tube or the esophagus. But now we know that actually, oftentimes, it's not because the person's making more acid that needs to be squelched. It could be because their stomach isn't making enough acid and is actually churning the food and trying to digest it, which can then swirl kind of up into the food tube, just kind of like a whirlpool would, just the swishing of the fluid, and rise up into the food tube and cause burning. But giving something that lessens the stomach acid would be the last thing you would do if that was really why somebody was having heartburn, right? So what we've got now are people that have had acid blocking medicines for heartburn. And unfortunately, the food now is going through and not being fully sterilized, because stomach acid is what sterilizes food. And if you block somebody's stomach acid, then you keep the food from being sterilized. And the bacteria can still exist that was in the food that you ate. And so now we are having a lot of issues with what we call SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which means that bacteria are now entering the small intestine, which really is supposed to receive only sterile food from the stomach. So as you can see, like in functional medicine, we do something different for heartburn. We might actually give somebody digestive enzymes that would help them to digest their food better, and even maybe a supplement that strengthens their stomach acid so that the food can digest more easily. And that way your digestion is not altered in ways that would promote any infection downrange.
Mm-hmm. Could you give us some instance or any instance from your life when you were able to fix or resolve any health problem through functional medicine?
No. You know what's funny is I really think functional medicine is just about really thinking things through. And it doesn't have to be a special supplement, and it doesn't have to be really anything. I think that one of the most easy ways of looking at it, in my standpoint, because I really don't call myself just a functional medicine doctor. I just do doctoring a little differently. I love all of my patients. I sincerely just love them. I love them. I think they're there to help me learn, and I put my all into them. And there was one patient, I remember in the military, and he was a Special Forces pararescue man. And what that meant is that's the Special Forces for the Air Force, just like maybe Navy SEALs. Navy has the SEALs, and Army has the Rangers. Well, Air Force has the pararescue men, and they go behind enemy lines to rescue someone who may have parachuted down, or their plane crashed down behind enemy lines. So they're trained just like other special forces, but they actually are able to. They're trained as a paramedic, and they bring people out of dangerous situations while patching any wounds they have. So they call them guardian angels. And so they did their indoctrination, which is the first step of their training, at my first base where I was assigned as a flight surgeon. And I remember they have a very high attrition rate. Like 200 people may start the training, and only 50 or 40 will make it to the final, graduation day, because their indoctrination is so difficult. And I remember I would do their physicals, and I remember there was one pararescue trainee who had to go get a echocardiogram, which is it's kind of like when you look at the belly of a pregnant lady to see the baby, but on the heart. And the reason he was sent was because he had a heart murmur. A doctor, one of my colleagues, had picked up a heart murmur, and he wanted to make sure it wasn't something that would affect him. And the echocardiogram came back and said that his heart had a defective aortic valve. And that's one of the major valves of the heart. And it was devastating for this individual, because he was very close to, making his mark and becoming a graduate. And he was number one on his team. And the commandant called me, and he said, "Doc, what do we do? What do we do? This guy is going to be medically disqualified." And I just thought, oh my goodness, what do we do? And I thought, you can't fake it. You can't cover it up. You can't, if it's there, then goodness, then it stands that he would be at risk for having an issue with that if he was under a lot of strain and stress over a long period of time. It was called a bicuspid aortic valve, which meant it was lacking one of the valve leaflets. So an aortic valve, if you look at it, it's supposed to look like a Mercedes sign. It has 3 leaflets that close and form a Mercedes sign. But he only had 2 valves, which made it look like just a circle split in half. And I thought, wow. And so I really just kind of reached down deep, and I thought, how could this go differently? And I looked at information about echocardiograms, and I looked at the statistics of the accuracy in the reading of an echocardiogram. And I saw that in a training institution that the accuracy of reading echocardiograms is lower in where they're training residents than at a facility where they're not training student doctors, right? So I thought, okay, well, he got his at Wilford Hall, which is a training hospital. So I thought, how could we see the aortic valve more clearly? And there is a way, and one of those is to swallow a probe, which is not the most pleasant thing, to actually get closer to the heart to see more accurately the vessels as they're working. Because a usual echocardiogram is just a wand over the skin of the chest, like over the ribs, right there close to the nipple, and you just have some gel and a transducer. But this way, he'd have to swallow a probe, but we'd have greater access and proximity to the aortic valve. So he had to do that. I told him, I said, we got to get a better image. We've got to look closer. So he went and swallowed the probe, and miraculously, his original echocardiogram was misread, and the transesophageal echocardiogram showed a normal aortic valve. So I suppose when it comes to thinking out of the box, it doesn't always mean getting a supplement or doing something that we consider kind of like, what we see as holistic medicine. Sometimes it's just about never giving up and making sure that your person is taken care of, in a way that you just don't close any door. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Could you talk about any instance from a general population, not just from military or Air Force, where we can apply this functional integrative medicine, this kind of going to the source into our lives?
Oh, wow. That's a beautiful question. So the question is, how would we apply it to our own lives?
Yes.
Oh, that's so wonderful that you ask that, because I believe that we are pretty much unconscious of the power we have to run a very harmonious existence. I think that we see outside factors as being limitations rather than seeing our ability to have more say in the situation. For example, we have everything we need. There's this old saying that you have everything you need from inside you. and they say it in all the movies, and they say it in all the songs, and they say it in all the poems, and people are like, what does that mean? Well, actually, I really see patients every day that have very, very extensive health problems, and all they would need to do is balance their nervous system so that their body could have the access to the healing energies that restore and repair on a daily basis. But instead, we're stuck in this inefficient kind of almost like a NASCAR. If you've ever seen a NASCAR race and they're just circling and circling and circling, circling and circling and circling and circling, and the tires are wearing down and the engine's overheating and the brake pads are wearing away and you can see the smoke coming out, and you're like, when are they going to pull over at the pit stop? When are they going to get, a refresh? And that's our nervous system. Most people are running full out in this fight or flight, reactive, survivalistic, hypervigilant mode, just like a NASCAR during a major Daytona 500 or something. And yet, if they only knew the wear and tear that caused on their immune system, on their gut health, on their circulation, on their mental health, if they only knew that taking a pit stop, once a lap would allow, their engine to cool down, their brake pads to cool down, their body to, actually the body does more than just, do what a pit stop does. Like a pit stop basically changes out the tire, changes out a few things, and then you just keep going. But literally, if you stop and give your body the signal that, the race is over, And those brain waves lengthen to signal to the body that all is well and that there's no threat. And you turn off that fight or flight, hypervigilant survival mode, then you'd be amazed, because then the side of the nervous system that you need, which is called the parasympathetic rest and digest nervous system, kicks into gear, which the only thing it does is heal and repair after a day's work, after it takes out the trash, and it cleans out your brain while you're sleeping, and it refreshes and it regenerates and it restores and it rebalances it gives the immune system the energy it needs to actually do a good job and to get all those cancer cells and to fight off the bacteria and the viruses. And it gives the gut a chance to fully digest the food, and it gives the brain a chance to fully digest the traumas of the day. But see, we never stop. We never make a pit stop. And so we just keep on. And we weren't meant to be in a race all day, every day. But we have just found ourselves there due to how modern society kind of implores us to keep racing and gives us raises when we keep racing, and gives us medals and attaboys and attagirls when we keep racing. So we've kind of learned to live upside down in a ditch when it comes to balancing and being harmonious with ourselves.
I'm deep in this ignorance pool of nervous system. I would love to ask you that. Are you saying that balancing our nervous system will calm us down, will help us tapping into the innate power that we already have inside us?
Yes, absolutely.
What could some of those ways to balance our nervous system?
Well, I think it's different for many people, but balancing your nervous system starts with undoing the habits that happen when you're racing around the track. So, for a human racing around a track, which is their life, they're going to start breathing really shallow and very fast. And unfortunately, what they don't realize is that becomes a habit, and they don't even realize they're doing it. And normal breaths per minute is 6 breaths a minute, which is 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. That's 10 breaths. That's basically, that's 10 seconds per breath, and that's 6 breaths a minute. And that's really kind of the ideal high performance breath pace. But most people breathe about 15, 18, even 30 breaths a minute, and they are so used to it. And here's the thing, Nishant, is that it changes your physiology without you knowing it. So you could literally be walking around and saying, why am I always tired? And why am I always having this brain fog where I cannot think and I can't remember? And what you don't realize is you've been breathing and in a habit of breathing 18, 20 breaths a minute, where your blood chemistry actually shifts in that state. You're breathing off too much of your carbon dioxide, and as a result, your bloodstream is becoming more alkaline. And so you get respiratory alkalosis, which causes brain fog and fatigue. And then when you're breathing super fast like that, you have this membrane that separates your lungs from your guts, and it's called the diaphragm. And for you to breathe really fast, the diaphragm gets short and kind of it contracts. And in doing that, it helps you to breathe faster, because that's like the hypervigilant survival mode way. But there's this major nerve that passes through the diaphragm, and it's called the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve, VAGUS, is one of the largest nerves in the body, and it actually is what turns on the parasympathetic nervous system, or rest and digest nervous system. So if you're breathing super fast, you're actually impinging or pinching your gateway to recharge, rebuild, and restore your body. The side of the nervous system that does that is impinged. So breath work is actually one of the first things I would say to begin to introduce the concept of having more awareness of fixing things at the core.
Do you have other practices in your personal life to get calmed down?
Oh, I sure do. Do
What are
you have
those?
some too?
I meditate. I breathe. I
Yeah,
breathe a lot.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
everybody
yeah, and
breathes, but not shallow. I tend to be aware if my breathing is going shallow. Even at this time of
yeah,
podcast recording, I'm breathing, slowing
yeah,
breathing. So there are many patterns. I do it sometimes.
yeah. So,
Six is one of them. 6, 7, 8, 4, 7, 8. There are many breathing patterns to slow us down.
and I imagine that you try to do them throughout the day rather than just doing like 5 minutes of it and then be done for the day, right? You try to make it automatic.
Every time, and it's a
Every-
practice, constant practice, and reminding
Yeah, so it
myself.
becomes natural.
Yes, and even when I'm walking, when I'm going for a hike or for any nature walk, I'm trying to breathe the fresh air, so it really helps. And
Oh,
it
definitely.
kind of focusing my awareness and attention on the breath, because mind is wandering most of the time, so it's kind of focusing my attention on my breath so that I calm down. That's me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I see people that do kind of a yoga class that might help for that night or that evening or for that moment or the next day or so. But what we need to do, and I think that's what you're saying you're doing, is carry the process with us, not go to the yoga class, but be the yoga class, where you're breathing all the time like you are in yoga class, where you put the little post-it note up, by your nightstand or by your teapot, or just reminding you to make it automatic. And I think that's what I am doing. I love to take information that's cognitive information and then create experiential knowledge of it. Does that make sense?
To some extent,
So
can you
I like
elaborate?
so yeah, absolutely. So like I once was under a lot of stress, and I was kind of at the end of my rope of being able to really kind of, it was a sink or swim kind of moment, and I really just kind of reached out for help from what I thought might be a higher power or unified consciousness, I felt like I was guided to read so many books, like wisdom books and ancient, books of all different kinds and means. And it was a lot of information. I remember that year, I think I read like 200 books alone. And I thought,
Wow.
wow, that's a lot of information.
Do you
But
remember
the thing is,
some of the books?
oh, oh, definitely. I definitely Krishnamurti, Rumi. I just fell deeply into Bhagavad Gita. Just so many of the ancient wisdom books, like because there was a common thread, right? But still, it was information. It was cognitive information, and so I was really starting to look into making it kind of an experiential information for me, not just a cognitive exercise to read that book and put it back on the shelf. So again, just like I look very deeply into how do I bring that unified consciousness to my everyday, to my every minute, to my every breath, to my every beingness. And I think everybody's on a slightly different path for that, depending on where they are. Because I could tell you,
Mhm.
in my 20s and 30s, I was like the most type A person you'd ever want to meet. I mean, I was going 100 miles an hour with my hair on fire most of the time. And now I do the same amount of things and accomplishments or tasks, if you will, but I do them in such a peaceful place, like a guided place. I don't have to put so much efforting into it. And I feel like part of health is less efforting and more being in the flow of this kind of larger connection to. If you look at it, you have both abilities. You have the left brain, which is very cognitive, analytical, and it's very linear thinking, black or white, yes or no. It doesn't see many grays or shades of gray. But the other side of the brain, the right side, is the relational unified consciousness side. It's the side there that you're I think your best self really lies, to be quite honest with you. And so when you spend more time in that kind of relational, expansive, unified consciousness state, which could just be going out in nature and just being in such awe and wonder, just in complete, just feeling a part of the environment, the ancient classical ways of teaching would say that that was connecting to your spirit, and your spirit is your higher self. And so the brain waves of the higher self, they resonate with the higher thought patterns of awe, wonder, inspiration, unity, which is love, right? Feeling one with something is love. And so, yeah, I want to be more like that. That's like solar powered energy. It's completely sustainable. It's completely renewable. It makes no soot or smog or smoke, or it doesn't pollute the environment. So that's my whole kind of practice, is finding more ways to be with that.
So you mentioned that you have those ways. Could you talk about some of those ways? You mentioned breath work, nature, any other practice that you have to connect to your higher self in your everyday life?
Well, yeah. So, everybody has a different way. Everybody has a different path. And some people would call it, a religion. Some people would say, oh, there is something up there that has been here before and has followed the path and showed the way, and is now, because they've done it, now I can do it. And, Muhammad or Buddha or Jesus, right? And then there are some that say, gosh, I just feel like I can plug into the energy of the earth. That's just resonant. And Nikola Tesla would do that. There's an actual really good documentary on Netflix. It's called Teslafy Me. Teslafy Me. It's about how he could kind of be very resonant or very plugged in to the energy of the earth and understand it in ways that allowed him to manipulate it to our own well-being and our own advancements. But he would always come back to how he had to resonate with it, kind of become one with it. Kind of like when you're hiking and you're forest bathing and you come out of the forest a whole nother person, kind of that way. So everybody has their personal, and that's the most important part. Because I know in many podcasts, they'll ask the guests, they'll say, well, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do?
What do you do?
The most important question is, what feels right to me? What feels right to me? And the listener needs to ask themselves that, because my path is definitely not the path for someone else. So for me, I feel very, very kindredness, like a very, very close association with the tradition in many different religions of the mystic path, which is a very personal relationship with the divine. And so Rumi called it ecstatic love. Mm-hmm. He was He was a Sufi master. He was a poet, but he gave us so many. Yeah, absolutely. He gave us some beautiful wisdom, right? But then, there've also been Christian mystics. There's a Christian mystic named Luisa Picaretta, who's an Italian woman, and she lived in early 1900s, and she's up for canonization as a saint, and she wrote 36 volumes, like 15,000 pages of this kind of direct wisdom, if you will, kind of like Rumi, but how to bilocalize the soul, basically bringing heaven to earth, but being unified with your creator at the same time, which is basically kind of a quantum theory. It's like, how can you be two places at once? And she's saying you can do it. And she was only educated to a first grade level. And believe me, she wasn't really taught to read or write. So people were blown away when she's writing 36 volumes of like complete prose of this, this type of material. And so, I get a hold of this literature from people who've been there, done that, and I just sink very deep into it. And it's not something that happens overnight. It definitely.
So work.
I think it takes your whole life. I mean, I was just listening to some information about the path of even the historical figure Jesus. They said at 30 was when he started to go and do his work in the community and teach. And the question was, why did it take until 30? And the answer was, well, because he was taking the information from the books he'd read, and he was making it experiential within himself. He was creating the experiential knowledge, which means so that it flowed out from him rather than having to open the book, that it made it real. It made it real in his life.
I'm in my 30s.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm learning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at Rumi, he didn't start I think he started having a scribe start taking down his messages, as poetry, late in his life. So it's something that we work on. It's like the biggest discipline, I think, of the life is to be living, with the world's needs of you, with the world's responsibilities, with your obligations and things in front of you, but doing every single one of them with a deeper connection going on the whole time, like taking out the trash, and yet it being a beautiful time where you can commune with your beloved upstairs in the higher dimensional realm of that's what Rumi would call it, a beloved, right? The creator, higher powers, higher self, so to speak.
Do you suggest meditation to your patients?
I do. As a matter of fact, when I do some acupuncture on my patients sometimes, and if they've never had an experience with meditation, I'll often sit by their bedside and I will do a visual guided meditation while the needles are taking effect, and I'll record it as an audio file so that they can listen when they go home, before they go to sleep, or when they wake up, because what we're trying to do is have them remember how to reset their nervous system. And in doing the meditation and learning how to meditate, it allows them to put some space between their thoughts and themselves, and not to identify with every thought, and kind of give them a higher perspective. Because keep in mind, when we're in the NASCAR race of life and we're lapping, zoom, 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 our brain waves are very short. It literally, it's fast food thinking. It's like, what has hurt me, what is hurting me now, and what's going to hurt me is basically kind of the defensive egoic thoughts of the fight or flight nervous system. It's very protective and it's very hypervigilant. And so if we can slow somebody down with meditation and expand their brain waves, then what happens is it's like having a much greater Wi-Fi signal. And instead of like barely being able to check your email, which is like the Wi-Fi of the fight or flight nervous system, you go into that phase of meditation and your brain waves expand, and it's like you have a Wi-Fi that's so high speed that you can download a movie instantaneously. And that is how you find more solutions to your problems. That's how you find more wise answers to your deepest, concerns. That's where win-win situations happen. But if you're in the middle of the fight or flight nervous system, you're asked to make a big decision. Oftentimes it's the knee-jerk reaction, or it's something that doesn't take into account all of the intricacies of the question being asked of them, because you don't have the wavelength, you don't have the bandwidth to actually see the whole picture, right?
Yes. I would love to ask you, Amy, do you have meditation practice in your life? Do you do it on your own?
Oh, yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, yes, I have a prayer room, and it's a walk-in closet in my house that has been converted. I painted it all black. so that it would be very dark. So that seemed
Prayer room or the
so
house?
it's a room underneath the stairs. And I think it was a closet. And it's funny because I painted it all black, and then I hung my prayer flags, and I hung some bells, and I hung some more prayer flags, and I ran some white Christmas lights around it, and put a nice, kind of not a yoga mat, but that kind of material as the floor. And I have my candles, and I have my little place where I burn more candles if I need to, and I've got my symbols that resonate with me, that just take me to a beautiful introspective feeling. And it's one of I'd say, everybody these days are coming out of the closet for all kind of reasons, and I think it's great, but I'm going into the closet. That's what I do. That's what I do. And now I've been doing that for probably 8 to 12 years now. And now I've gotten to where it's nice to be in the prayer room, but I can take that with me where I go. And that's been just in the last maybe 6 months, I've been really able to maintain that prayer room feeling where I am.
What kind of meditation do you have in your prayer room?
Okay, so again, let's see. For me, I respond more because of, I don't know, there are many kind of associations with, okay, why do we resonate with something? And for me, there's this sense that we might have been here before. Like in Buddhism, there's a sense that our consciousness has existed before, and we're here to learn new lessons this time around, but we still have kind of maybe a cognitive understanding of some place we've been or experiences we've had. And for one that's very real for me is, because I'm a past life regression therapist as well, is my
past life?
So past life. Are you familiar with the possibility of past lives?
Not really.
Oh, okay. So in certain religions or belief systems, there's the idea that you as a consciousness, which is the energy that you are, is just really wearing the baggage of your body. But it really is just kind of there temporarily. And when you die, the consciousness or the light of you, the soul, has other jobs to do, and other places to go, and other awarenesses and other experiences. Have you ever heard of that philosophy?
A little bit, not too much.
A little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you agree that we're all a soul, or do you feel like we're all just like flesh and that's all?
I do agree that there is a soul which never dies.
Exactly. So what happens when your body dies? What happens to the soul?
So I would not make any statement here, but I can speak from Indian tradition that in Hinduism, basically, when somebody dies, that a dead body is burned. We do cremation.
Yeah.
The dead body is burned, and then the ashes, we collect the ashes, and the ashes are being thrown away in the sacred Ganga or sacred river. And firsthand I saw with my grandfather and with my elder brother who passed away 6 years ago. He was 6 years elder to me, so he would be 39. I'm 33 right now, and he would be 39, and he passed away from blood cancer. So wow. Yes, I would say that I'm very much aligned that soul never dies. It only transforms from one thing to another or something like that. It's our body. That's why in meditation we say that do not judge yourself. Exactly. You are not a body, you are not a thought. All those things.
Exactly. So it's interesting, as I started meeting my patients where they were, my patients would often kind of describe certain things that were just unbelievable. They would say something like, gosh, I keep having dreams that my World War II plane crashed and I couldn't get my buddy out, and I just keep having this. And And I know every since I was little, I know every plane that, existed in World War II, and nobody had to like teach me. It was like I already kind of understood like how they worked. And I could even remember like if somehow like knowing how to fly a plane. And so the person I would ask, I'd say, my goodness, well, what do you think that's about? And they said, well, I just don't know. And so there was a certain therapist that would go and help the person to just, it's kind of a form of just kind of getting in a very relaxed place and asking them certain questions about, maybe this incident that they were having. Maybe it was coming from an experience before that. Maybe the slate wasn't so blank when the person was born, and there was some residue from a previous experience that had been there before. And so the person came back and said, yeah, I went to this person that kind of specializes in this technique, and I was able to see, that I was a pilot. I was a pilot in World War II. I crashed into the ocean, I remember, and this happened and that happened. And whether or not, you want to believe that, I think very often, I think what was important was that it explained for her why she was the way she was, because she was like, I'm going crazy. How do I know all these things? How do I feel so familiar with this and that? And so in understanding that she might have some experiences that were left over kind of coming into this new experience, it allowed her to let loose of a lot of judgment or shame or blame or feeling crazy. And I think the most important life is the one we're living now, for sure. And the power is in the moment, in the present moment that you're living. But when I'm in that dark prayer room and I'm in my little happy place, I can tell you I've probably been there for generations or eons or something, because it feels very, very familiar. And so I think that's why we do have to know ourselves and know what resonates with us, because somebody going into a dark closet that's all black, barely lit, might be claustrophobic, might cause fear, might cause trepidation. But, perhaps I've had an experience that makes me feel very comfortable there. Like maybe I have been in deep prayer in places and other experiences before, and it feels very natural. It feels very familiar. And so, yeah, it definitely works for me. But everyone has to ask themselves who they are.
What I'm understanding from this conversation, that you merge ancient wisdom into the modern science. So what made you excited about merging this ancient wisdom from Rumi from so many years before people came into this modern science? What was your motivation for this?
I love to translate for people that are maybe stuck in their left-sided, analytical, concrete mind. I love to use the education I've had to bridge them into other possibilities and realms, using the language that they understand, upholding the belief patterns that they resonate with, but yet asking them perhaps to take a step in a different direction. For example, engineers often, I used to see nothing but engineers for a little while when I was in corporate medicine. And often in the military, someone was very analytical, depending on their job. And so I would have to speak very analytical. I would have to make inferences to nothing of the spirit, because that would just really be outside of their comfort zone. That would be outside of what they believe is true. They just think they're a computer that's kind of, from the neck up is a central processing unit, and from the neck down is a transport system that moves them from place to place.
So I would love to ask you something very simple. What does your first 60 to 90 minutes in the morning look like?
Oh, so it's been a blessing with COVID, because that's become something that's actually now a bit of a tradition for me. It's a bit of a welcome type of plan. I did not actually have one of those every day until COVID kind of allowed me the space to really create the habit of it. I had it occasionally, but now it's just kind of something I go to, and that is when, before I even open my eyes, right as I'm becoming aware that I'm awake, before the first thought even comes in, I often just give some gratitude and attention to a prayer, kind of reaching up for my connection, reaching up for just giving love to all that is that has created what I'm experiencing. And so I really kind of have a powwow for some moments with that, and a deep listening for any guidance that I need for the day. And oftentimes when I am waking up from a dream, I'll often hear some guidance. Something will come into my mind that I just need to know, or that is especially, I guess, what I need to pay attention to. So it's a very special time when you're waking up. You're coming out of unconsciousness into consciousness. So I would say, please give it sacred time to develop, like a flower that's blooming, and not bolt awake and look at your phone, but just allow it to just evolve into being awake. And then often I'll go downstairs, I'll duck into my prayer room and just have a moment. Sometimes my husband, he'll usually just light some incense, and on YouTube, he'll pick a channel. It's just amazing. He's so talented in finding the free music that's the most beautiful music you've ever heard, and would probably pay a lot of money to get the album of, but he always finds the free versions of them.
Could you send us those links whenever you get a chance?
Goodness. I mean, they're either angelic, or or just so soothing, or, oh my goodness. Anyway, yeah, he's got a real talent for that. So I come downstairs, and often the incense will already be burning in that quiet of the beautiful music piping through. And it's interesting because he'll turn on the TV, but with no volume. He says he likes to see the colors of the TV. And it's interesting. So we may see the pictures on the news, but we don't hear what's happening. And we're not there for any length of time, really, to actually sit and watch it. We're usually just going to get ready. But if I have a moment, I will go out. If it's dawn, it's my favorite time at dawn. And I'll get my boots on, because it's usually a lot of dew outside. We live in Kentucky, and it's very grassy. And there's fields that just go on. And we have 10 acres with this little natural spring-fed pond, and I walk out to the pond, and I take a walk around the pond, and I just notice what might be new, because every season has a new flower, a new animal, a new butterfly, a new just gift. And I just take so much pleasure in finding what's new of that day. And usually the little mini zoologist in me wants to identify it. So I have this app called Picture This that allows me to take a picture of what I've seen. And if it's a plant, it will tell me what kind it is and what it's for, and what medicinal properties it has. And so I just get to know my backyard. And so as I'm walking around, again, it's a very sacred time for me. And again, I'm not thinking anything about the day so far as work is involved, just seeking to connect with all that is. And I like my heart. I'm so in love with nature. I've always been. That sometimes it sometimes even brings tears to my eyes when it's there's so much just beauty in the atmosphere in the early morning. And so then when I come back in, I have this wonderful Greek mountain tea that I make. It's single sourced from the top of the mountains in Greece, Mount Olympus, Mount Aetherius. And I've never been able to drink caffeine because it genetically, it makes me more frenetic than it makes me productive. So I'm looking always for the antioxidants, that green tea has, but don't want the caffeine. So it's always been a struggle. Well, I found a solution, and the Greek mountain tea is caffeine free naturally, but it actually has more antioxidants and flavonoids than green tea. So
So
I make a big, big cup of that.
can we find this green mountain tea online?
Yeah, it's at Clio Tea. That's KLIOTEA.com. And again, they do chemical analysis of their tea, and it's got more flavonoids and antioxidants. Keep in mind, antioxidants are what keep your inflammation down in your body and help restore and repair. So, and I'm all for getting people off of caffeine because it can actually hurt your adrenal glands if you're already in stress. Having caffeine can make your body produce more adrenaline, which increases your stress even more.
That is so interesting. When people are stressed, they tend to consume more caffeine.
Yeah, and if you have the genetics that's able to break coffee down with no problem, then it's no issue at all. But if you have a genetic factor, a genetic inheritance pattern that is not able to break down the caffeine as well, keep in mind the enzyme that breaks down caffeine is the same enzyme that breaks down adrenaline. So often people that drink a lot of coffee and are sensitive to caffeine, meaning they don't have that much enzyme to break down the caffeine, keep in mind any adrenaline they make during the day isn't being broken down in the bloodstream either because it's competing with the coffee and breaking down. They use the same enzyme to break down. And so often you'll get people that just can't wind down, or people will come up to them and say, gosh, you've been upset for days. Why don't you just let that go? And the answer is their adrenaline is still circulating in the system from when it happened, and they're still waiting for the enzyme to become available to break it down. It's being utilized by the coffee.
Is there a test or mechanism or a medical test to identify this process?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, you would go through a genetic sequencing. Genetic sequencing is out there. So there are many ways of getting that done. The most popular people know of is 23andme.com, or you've probably heard on that. I think they've been the one that's marketed themselves the most. However, some people have more desire for security of their data and kind of an assurity that their data will be secure. And I know 23andMe just got bought out by GlaxoSmithKline, which is a pharmaceutical company. And so people are wondering, what's going to happen to their data? Is it safe? And so I work with a company, Illumina Array, that is very, very security minded. And so you can get your genetics sequenced, and there's a particular gene called COMT, and it will tell you how you process caffeine, whether or not it's a good idea for you and you have no problem with it, or whether or not you don't have enough enzyme to do it and it competes with the adrenaline you produce.
Maybe I need to do that.
Yeah, you'll usually know a little bit if you're sensitive, because after a couple of cups of coffee, you might feel more frenetic than productive. You might feel more shaky than calm, And so usually there is some indication, if you listen to your body, that caffeine is doing you more harm than good.
That is an interesting topic. Well, Dr. Amy, it's been a wonderful conversation with you, and I know we are cutting short on time, so I would love to ask you that, what is the impact you want to leave on this world?
Oh, well, it's interesting. I don't really see myself as anything special. To be honest, I just want more of mankind and humanity to know how to live a more peaceful, more authentic, and more harmonious life. And to be honest with you, there's this old saying, like a lot of companies, they'll start a company and they'll say, we want to affect 1 billion people by 2025. They'll say, that's our company's mission statement. We want to affect or change or help 1 billion people by this year or that year. And the interesting thing is you're doing it all the time. You do not realize that the invisibility of your nature and your effect in this world leaves ripples and effects that you can never measure, that you could never even give yourself credit for, because we're all in this tapestry together. We're all such parts of the whole, such pieces of the puzzle together, and I am just one thread of this tapestry of humankind, and that's all there is, other than knowing that you affect 1 billion people just by being that thread in the tapestry.
That is a very beautiful way to put it out. I've never heard somebody speaking like this very graciously, that we are impacting and making a positive difference every time, and we are a thread in that tapestry. It's a ripple effect. We don't have to measure everything. It is our ego that wants to measure everything.
That's exactly right. Because if you spent a morning just in quiet peace, that emanates. If you spend a morning just in pure love for all that is and all you've been blessed with, that affects the world. Be just the best you can be, and it affects the world. So
powerful, very powerful.
Yeah,
great.
We can't measure everything, nor do we want to. But I remember, I think it was Tesla, I believe, that said that when we start to measure, once we start realizing the importance of the invisible world around us, we will advance as a civilization more in that time than we ever have to that point. So,
love it. And my last question to you, Dr. Amy, is where can our listeners find you online or learn about your work?
Oh, sure. So you can see me at wellsmartservice.com. So that's the business website. And you can see me on LinkedIn or Instagram under Wellsmart. I think in Twitter it's at Well Inside In Out. So instead of Wells in, let's see. Yeah, Well Inside In instead of IN, it's just the letter N, out.
We'll put the links in the show notes. And I would like to mention the last but not the least, to our listeners, that there is so much great information on the website where you can learn more about how to connect with your mind, body. There's so many great articles, blogs, presentations, videos that I'm personally going to learn from Dr. Amy. This is a ripple effect that Dr. Amy is creating here.
Oh, it's wonderful. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amy. It was a wonderful conversation with you. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to this podcast episode today. If you did enjoy this, please subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcast, or you can visit https://nishantgarg.me, NISHANTGARG.me. You can also share this episode with your loved ones to help them live a fulfilled life. You are not alone in this journey. We all struggle in life. There is no shame in talking about it. I go through my highs and lows. I get depressed, and these practices help me in living a resilient life. You can also do this. You got this. Don't judge yourself. You are doing the best you can. And thank you so much again.